But I think I just wanted to highlight these conversations in the context of some of the work that the United Church of Canada is doing in other ways, and that is through Iridesc, the Living Apology Project, which has invited people from across the country to share their experiences of homophobia, queerphobia, transphobia, really over the past 30 years. You know, what is this journey of the entire denomination of wanting to embrace being more affirming through policies and, you know, made at General Council in 88, but then also that lived out reality. And one of the lessons that that project has really gifted us is the necessity for lament to be a part of how we gather as church and how we hold space for these difficult conversations, and how there's such a need when harm is done to be able to just pause and breathe and hold. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know, Ren, it's great that you were like, okay, where's the hope? What do we do next? What's going on? And I think it's important for us not to just say everything's bad and end there. But just that, I think the act of breathing into our feelings, creating space to really name pain and let that be affirmed and real is so important as well. And that it helps us sort of have a fuller, deeper sense of who we are moving forward. It's great to resist in all sorts of ways and to like celebrate with pride, but that I think lament and pride are a dance that need to be interconnected to each other.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
In hearing you reflect on that, one of the pieces that, I'm sort of realizing is that hearing all of us, we're all kind of share the same perspective here, right? But I have to think it's like, we can get all excited about, having a peaceful approach or having a rah-rah-rah approach that we're like righteously fighting the good fight. But I realize, how many people with a different ideology feel that they're doing a good thing. And that's a piece that I'm struggling with to figure that out. Because, I meet with a lot of people on a weekly basis who are coming from large evangelical faith communities who are really struggling because they are feeling so loved, so welcomed, except for this one little piece that makes them feel so shamed and so excluded. And, people in these communities feel that they're doing a good thing. And so there's a piece there around that it's a blind spot is what it is. And it's in a community who maybe people who haven't had to hear or listen to stories or understand another perspective. As a non-binary person myself, I understand so much what you talk about, Michiko. And it's like, when people finally get it and use your pronouns, you're like, oh, yeah, you get it. But that's just a blind spot, right? But at the same time, we notice it, right? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like, how do we gently help people, because, we all know the log in our eye is always there too, right? How do we, right? How do we help folks along? And then, we had a really cool weekend this weekend. We had Irshad Manji here. She's founded the School for Moral Courage, and she grew up in the Islamic faith and has been calling for Islam reform and faced a lot of the similar struggles that we're facing in the Christian community, right? And one of the questions she's posing, and I think it's really kind of juicy at the core, but again, it goes back to what we're talking about, is that to be heard, we need to be willing to listen. To be seen, we have to be willing to witness. But again, I hear it. Why is it always on us as the community that has been oppressed to hold grace for the oppressors?
That's an excellent point. And I think that's where Affirm United, Affirm United does a really great job of, embracing the understanding and educating the understanding that welcoming is not enough. But I recently heard the numbers about how many actual United Church congregations are affirming, as opposed to how many United Church congregations there are in Canada. What are those numbers? Do you know them off the top of your head? Not to put you on the spot, but anyway.
Yeah, no, so I think it's really, it's under 10%
right.
of the congregation. So we have about 100, 150 that are affirming ministries. Of course, amalgamations and church closures, restructuring factor into fluctuating numbers. And we have around 200 that are in process. So that is exciting to actually see exponential growth. But yeah, in terms of the larger, how many churches there are out there, it's quite small.
At what point is the United Church of Canada willing to say, wait a minute, this is not up to every individual congregation. This is actually where we're going to set the bar. We're going to set the bar at affirming. And if you don't know what that is or why, then there's an intentional education piece, right? Like being welcoming places the onus on the oppressor, or sorry, it places the onus on the oppressed to take a risk. Whereas affirming churches, we put the onus on ourselves to put it outwardly on our building that this is going to be less of a risk when you walk in here, right? So I don't know, man. I would challenge the United Church of Canada to say, at what point are you going to set the tone and set the bar and say, where nobody is actually, again, you don't want to mandate things and you don't want to dictate things, but at some point, if we're going to evolve as a species, we have to hold people to account, and really take it upon ourselves to educate people about why welcoming is not enough. I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, though, Michiko.
Yes. How do we honor our congregationalist roots?
Yeah.
In the United Church of Canada, in terms of policy. And I mean, as someone who's worked at the national office as well, and I think, I think it's been helpful to learn this sort of like through day in, day out operations of the church, how these questions get asked. I think that for me, the reasons why I don't feel as sort of like, my key concern is not about policy decisions being set. Is because we already have those guidelines as an organization, and they've been great ways to open doors. As a denomination, we've been able to participate in conversations that other denominations have not been able to. So the fact that, we were brought to speak to the Senate and to government when they were talking about same-sex marriage, and able to say, like, as people of faith, we believe this. I think that's amazing that we have that capacity. In terms of the conversation of how faith is lived out in each community of faith, I feel like I'm thinking about the image of the mustard seed, right? How, this kingdom of God being something that starts so small and spreads, and its strength and beauty and the life that it invites that can flourish in it, the birds and everything, it's not from being the tallest or the biggest, but just that it's hardy and can spread. And so I often liken Affirm United to being a social movement, and that what's so beautiful about that is it's when people engage and take ownership for their communities and what happens, and that enables transformation at a level that's different. Policy is great, but the change of heart is, I think, so important too.
That's a really, really good point. So if you're going to come and just say, you know what, this is where we've set the bar, people aren't going to have that emotional engagement that we need them to have. But at the same time, how can we then take up the initiative of being a lot more educational about just how significant the difference is between being welcoming and being affirming? you know, and I guess the importance of entering into that process. Not saying you're not doing a good job. You're doing an amazing job, but how can we each, even as the ministers in our individual congregations, put that out there, so that you're not working, you know, so that we're all working toward that same momentum as the mustard seed.
If I can reflect something back, this is something that I've actually noticed in a lot of different contexts with different sort of communities within communities, or people with different experiences, even within the United Church. There's sort of this balancing act that I'm hearing you folks name between, there's sort of the desire, the need for a kind of really, a really deep kind of grace, like a compassionate ministry, the kind of thing, you know, that Keith, you started talking about, and the rest that the others have reflected, where there's a recognition that, you know, it's sort of, there needs to be something more than just a hard and fast line that gets drawn in order for true transformation to happen. And then on the other hand, there's also this need for hard and fast lines where harm is being done and is immediate, and there's a need for some degree of safety. I hear this tension a lot in conversations with different people, not just folks who identify as LGBT or queer, and it's a real challenge, I find, in the church. It's sort of particularly for the people who sort of who live it, right? It's like you don't have the option of, like the safety is also a primary concern, and so it's a tough thing. And I kind of wanted to ask a question sort of to build on this. So for folks who identify as queer within the church, right, you have both of those pieces, and they're both very real realities that you face immediately in your daily experience. And then there are a lot of folks in our church who are allies, or cis straight allies, and wanting to sort of to be part of the church's, you know, stance against queerphobia. It's sort of moved towards being a truly sort of full body of Christ. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about sort of what specific role or call those communities or individuals might be called to in this wider challenge that the church is facing. Does that make sense as a question? So
what's the role in allies in all of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, allies are significant, because it's almost like I started to think like one of the most important allies is like transformed white man, like kind of like yourself, Keith, like people who are sort of the dominant in society, but have undertaken that process of transformation. But see, like, so people, I could say the exact same thing, and Keith could say the exact same thing, but the wider society would tend to have it resonate more from it coming out of Keith's mouth, right? Just because that's the way our society is. Like, it's so if the most important ally is like the transformed white man, then it's important for allies to raise their voices just as loud as the people that are being oppressed, because it's the people who are resistant to change are going to listen to their peers more than they're going to listen to the people they're oppressing, right? So our allies have a lot of power in that respect. I think people who are resistant to change will listen to their peers, which could be allies, more than they might listen to the people that they are oppressing. So I think that lifts up their voice